The weight of time. Rachel Monroe checked her phone for the 15th time that hour, her hands trembling as she stared at the message from Seattle Memorial Hospital. The words blurred through her tears, but their meaning was crystal clear. Her father had 72 hours before they would discharge him to hospice care. 72 hours to come up with $180,000 for the heart transplant surgery that would save his life? She stood in the employee locker room of the Grand Pacific Hotel, wearing the crisp white uniform required for tonight's charity gala. At 26 years old, Rachel had become an expert at appearing calm while her world crumbled around her. She smoothed down her blonde hair, tucked into a neat bun, and forced her green eyes to focus on something other than the panic threatening to overwhelm her. Outside the locker room, she could hear the sounds of Seattle's elite gathering for the annual Tech Innovation Gala. Crystal glasses clinked. Designer heels clicked against marble floors, and the gentle hum of wealth and power filled the air. Rachel had been working these events for 3 months, taking every extra shift she could find on top of her full-time nursing job. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. A chance encounter at the ballroom sparkled with thousands of tiny lights reflecting off chandeliers that probably cost more than Rachel would make in 5 years. She moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, offering champagne to guests who barely noticed her existence. That was the thing about serving the wealthy. You became invisible. It's just another piece of the elegant backdrop you paid for. Rachel was refilling her tray at the service bar when she felt someone watching her. The sensation was so strong that she looked up, her eyes meeting a pair of intense blue ones across the room. The man was tall, probably over 6 feet, with dark brown hair that had just enough gray at the temples to make him look distinguished rather than old. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders, and there was something about the way he carried himself that commanded attention without demanding it. Harrison. Rachel recognized him from the event program. The tech billionaire who had revolutionized cloud computing and made his first billion before he turned 30. Now at 38, he was known for his strategic investments and his complete disinterest in the social scene. Yet here he was, staring at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Rachel quickly looked away, reminding herself that men like Harrison Blake didn't notice women like her. She was the help, nothing more. But when she glanced back a moment later, he was still watching her, and this time there was concern in his expression. Could he see the desperation she was trying so hard to hide? The predator emerges. Rachel, my office now. The voice belonged to Dennis Walsh, the hospital administrator who had been making her life miserable for the past 2 weeks. He was a small man with thinning hair and cold gray eyes that made Rachel's skin crawl every time. He looked at her. Rachel followed him through the service corridors to a small office tucked away from the main event. Her stomach twisted with dread. She knew what was coming. Walsh had made his intentions clear 3 days ago when he'd first propositioned her. "Have you thought about my offer?" Walsh closed the door behind them, his smile predatory and confident. "Mr. Walsh, please." Rachel's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "There has to be another way. I can work more shifts. I can take out loans." "Loans?" Walsh laughed, a harsh sound that made Rachel flinch. "Who's going to give you a loan when you're already drowning in medical debt?" "No, sweetheart. I'm offering you a simple solution. One night with me and I'll personally ensure your father gets moved to the top of the transplant list. I have connections, Rachel. I can make things happen." This man controlled access to the medical care her father desperately needed, and he was using that power to try to buy her body. The worst part was that a tiny, desperate voice in the back of her mind was actually considering it. What was her dignity compared to her father's life? "I need more time to think," she whispered, hating herself for not immediately refusing. Walsh's expression hardened. "Time is something your father doesn't have. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. After that, his case gets reviewed and likely dismissed due to inability to pay. This is your last chance, Rachel." He stepped closer, and Rachel could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something that made her stomach turn. His hand reached for her arm. She instinctively pulled back. The intervention, the office door flew open with such force that it slammed against the wall. Harrison Blake stood in the doorway, his blue eyes blazing with cold fury. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as he stepped inside. his presence filling the small space like an approaching storm. Remove your hand from her arm, Walsh, or lose the ability to use it. Harrison's voice was quiet, controlled and absolutely terrifying in its calm delivery. Walsh jerked his hand back as if burned, his face going pale. Mr. Blake, I don't know what you think you heard, but this is a private conversation between myself and my employee. Harrison's gaze shifted to Rachel, and his expression softened slightly before returning to Walsh with renewed intensity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this young woman work for Seattle Memorial Hospital as a registered nurse? When did you acquire authority over a hotel catering staff? Rachel watched in amazement as Walsh stammered, clearly caught off guard. She works our charity events as additional income. I was simply discussing her schedule. Really? Harrison pulled out his phone and pressed a button. Patricia, I need you to pull up everything we have on Dennis Walsh, hospital administrator at Seattle Memorial. Employment history, financial records, any complaints filed against him. I want it on my desk in 20 minutes. Walsh's face went from pale to red. You can't do that. That's private information. Actually, I can. Harrison's smile was cold and dangerous. Seattle Memorial receives significant funding from Blake Technologies Foundation. That makes me very interested in how their administrators conduct themselves, especially when they're sexually harassing staff members. Rachel's heart pounded as she watched Walsh deflate before her eyes. This powerful man who had terrified her moments ago now looked small and pathetic in the face of Harrison's controlled fury. Get out, Harrison said quietly. And if I ever hear of you approaching Miss Monroe again, or any other woman for that matter, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure you never work in healthcare administration anywhere in this country. Are we clear? Walsh practically ran from the office, leaving Rachel alone with Harrison Blake. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's legs suddenly felt weak, and she reached for the desk to steady herself. Are you all right? Harrison's voice was gentle now, all traces of the cold fury gone. He moved toward her carefully, as if afraid he might startle her. I don't know, Rachel admitted, her voice shaking. Did that really just happen? It did. Harrison maintained a respectful distance, but his eyes never left her face. How long has he been harassing you? Rachel felt tears threatening to spill over. 2 weeks. Ever since he found out about my father's condition? Your father? Harrison's expression shifted to concern. Tell me what's happening. Somehow standing in that tiny office with a billionaire she'd met 5 minutes ago, Rachel found herself telling him everything. About her father's heart disease, about the transplant he needed, about the crushing weight of medical bills and the impossible deadline she was facing. The words poured out of her like water through a broken dam. And Harrison listened to every single one with complete attention. When she finished, Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that changed Rachel's entire world. What if I told you that by tomorrow morning your father's surgery could be fully funded and Walsh would never bother you again? Rachel stared at him, afraid to hope. Why would you do that for a complete stranger? Harrison's blue eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because in the 5 minutes I've known you, you've shown more courage and strength than most people display in a lifetime. Because watching that pathetic excuse for a man try to exploit your desperation made me angrier than I've been in years. And because something tells me that saving you might be the most important thing I ever do. Rachel felt her world tilt on its axis. This couldn't be real. Men like Harrison Blake didn't sweep in and save struggling nurses out of the kindness of their hearts. There had to be a catch. Some hidden price she'd have to pay. As if reading her mind, Harrison added, No strings attached, Rachel. No expectations, no obligations. Just one human being helping another in their time of need. Rachel searched his face for any sign of deception and found none. What she saw instead was genuine concern, a fierce protectiveness, and something else she couldn't quite name. Something that made her heart race and her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. I don't even know you, she whispered. Then let's change that, Harrison said softly. Have coffee with me after the gala ends. Let me tell you about my plan to help your father, and you can decide if you want to accept it. Rachel knew she should be cautious, should think this through carefully. But her father had 72 hours, and Harrison Blake was offering her hope when she had none left. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Coffee." Harrison's smile transformed his entire face, and Rachel realized that she might have just made either the best or worst decision of her life. The coffee shop confession. The small cafe on Madison Street was a world away from the glittering gala they'd just left. Rachel sat across from Harrison at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. It was nearly midnight, and the only other customers were a young couple sharing dessert and a student. Hunched over a laptop in the far corner, Harrison had removed his bow tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt, making him look less like an intimidating billionaire and more like an actual person. Rachel found herself relaxing slightly, though her heart still raced every time their eyes met. "Where Harrison said," his voice gentle. "What's he like?" Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed all evening. "He's the best man I've ever known. He was a firefighter for 30 years, retired 5 years ago. He used to take me to the station when I was little, and all the other firefighters would let me slide down the pole and try on their helmets." Oh. Her smile faded slightly. "That's probably why his heart is failing now. Decades of stress, running into burning buildings, carrying people to safety. He sounds like a hero," Harrison said. "He is. When my mother died 8 years ago from cancer, he held our family together. My younger brother was only 15, and I was 18, just starting college. Dad worked extra shifts, took on side jobs, made sure we both could finish school." Rachel's voice grew thick with emotion. "He saved so many people in his life. I can't let him die because I don't have enough money." Harrison reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple, but the warmth of his touch sent electricity through Rachel's entire body. "You won't. I promise you that." Rachel looked up at him, searching his face. "Why are you doing this? And please don't just say it's because you want to help. Nobody gives away nearly $200,000 without a reason." Harrison was quiet for a moment, his thumb absently tracing circles on the back of her hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with honesty. "My father had a heart attack when I was 23. I was building my first company, working 100 weeks, convinced I was going to change the world. I got the call that he'd collapsed at his office, and by the time I made it to the hospital, he was gone." Yeah. Rachel's breath caught. "Harrison, I'm so sorry. The worst part." Harrison continued, his blue eyes distant with memory. "I had the money by then. My startup had just gotten its second round of funding. I could have paid for the best cardiologists, the best treatment, regular checkups that might have caught the problem before it killed him, but I was too busy, too focused on success, too convinced I had all the time in the world." He refocused on Rachel's face. "I can't bring my father back, but I can make sure yours survives. And maybe that's selfish in its own way, but I don't care." Rachel felt tears sliding down her cheeks. This wasn't just about charity or random kindness. Harrison was trying to heal his own wounds by saving her father, and somehow that made his offer feel even more precious. "What do you want from me in return?" she asked, needing to understand the full picture. Harrison's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Honestly, I want to get to know you. I want to take you to dinner, hear about your life, learn what makes you laugh. I want to see if this connection I feel between us is real or just adrenaline from tonight's drama." He paused. "But none of that is conditional on accepting my help with your father's surgery. The money is yours regardless of whether you ever want to see me again after tonight." Rachel stared at him, overwhelmed by his sincerity. "That's insane. You don't even know if you like me." "I know enough," Harrison said softly. "I know you worked 2 jobs to save your father. I know you were willing to sacrifice your own dignity to keep him alive. I know you have the kind of strength that most people only pretend to possess." His blue eyes locked onto hers, and I know that when you walked into that ballroom tonight, you were the only person in that entire room I wanted to talk to. The leap of faith Rachel's mind spun with the impossibility of the situation. 12 hours ago, she'd been drowning in desperation with no way out. Now, a billionaire was offering her everything she needed and asking for nothing but a chance to know her better. It felt too good to be true, like a fairy tale that would evaporate the moment she woke up. "I'm scared," Rachel admitted. Not of you, but of what this means. I've spent my entire adult life being independent, handling my own problems, never asking for help, because I couldn't afford to owe anyone anything. I understand that, Harrison said. More than you might think. I built my entire empire on the principle that showing weakness was the same as inviting destruction. But Rachel, accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. Rachel thought about her father lying in that hospital bed, his skin pale and his breathing labored. She thought about her younger brother, Daniel, was overseas serving in the military and couldn't get leave to come home. She thought about the promise she'd made to her mother on her deathbed, that she would always take care of the family. "Okay," Rachel whispered. "I accept your help with my father's surgery." Harrison's smile was radiant. "Thank you for trusting me." But, Rachel added firmly, "I have conditions. I want a written agreement that specifies this is a loan, not a gift. I'll pay you back even if it takes me 20 years. Harrison started to protest, but Rachel held up her hand. Non-negotiable. I need to maintain some sense of self-respect here, Harrison. Please let me have this. Harrison studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. All right. We'll draw up papers stating it's an interest-free loan that you can pay back on whatever schedule works for you. Deal. Deal. Rachel felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. What happens now? Now, Harrison pulled out his phone. I call my attorney and have him start the paperwork. By 9 tomorrow morning, Seattle Memorial will have a certified check for the full amount, designated specifically for your father's treatment. Walsh will have no say in any of it. Rachel watched in amazement as Harrison made the call, speaking in the casual tone of someone who regularly moved six-figure sums of money around at midnight. Within 10 minutes, he'd set everything in motion. Her father was going to be saved. Done, Harrison said, ending the call and setting his phone on the table. Your father will get his transplant. Rachel burst into tears. All the stress, fear, and exhaustion of the past months came pouring out in great heaving sobs. Harrison was around the table in an instant, pulling her into his arms and holding her while she fell apart. He didn't try to quiet her or tell her everything was okay. He just held her, one hand stroking her hair, letting her release everything she'd been holding inside. When Rachel finally pulled back, her face blotchy and her eyes red, she expected to see pity or discomfort in Harrison's expression. Instead, she saw understanding and something that looked almost like tenderness. Sorry, she managed. I don't usually fall apart like that in front of strangers. Good thing I'm not planning to stay a stranger, Harrison said, his thumb gently wiping away the last of her tears. And Rachel, you never have to apologize for being human around me. The beginning of something real over the next 2 hours, Rachel and Harrison talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up as the only child of a demanding father who ran a small manufacturing company, about how he'd learned to code at age 12 and built his first app at 15, about the loneliness of success and how money solved some problems while creating entirely new ones. Rachel shared her own story. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, watching her parents struggle to make ends meet but never losing their kindness or generosity, her decision to become a nurse because she wanted to help people the way the hospital staff had helped her mother, her fear that she'd inherited her mother's genes and might face cancer someday, herself as the cafe's owner began cleaning up around them. Clearly hoping they'd leave soon, Harrison walked Rachel to her car. The Seattle night was cool, with a light mist in the air that made everything feel dreamlike. Can I see you again? Harrison asked, standing close enough that Rachel could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Tomorrow, after you've had time to process everything. I'd like that, Rachel said, surprised by how much she meant it. Despite the surreal circumstances, she genuinely enjoyed Harrison's company. He made her laugh, listened when she talked, and looked at her like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. Good. Harrison smiled, then seemed to hesitate. Rachel, I know tonight was overwhelming, and I know you have every reason to be skeptical of my intentions. But I want you to know that I meant what I said. No strings, no expectations. Whatever happens between us, it happens because we both want it, not because you feel obligated. Rachel stood on her tiptoes, and kissed his cheek gently. "Thank you, Harrison, for everything." Harrison's hand came up to touch the spot where she'd kissed him, his eyes wide with something that looked like wonder. "Get home safe. Text me when you arrive so I know you made it okay." "You don't have my number," Rachel pointed out. Harrison pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. Her contact information was already entered. "Patricia is very efficient," he explained with a slight grin. Rachel laughed despite herself. "That's slightly terrifying." "Welcome to my world," Harrison said, "though I promise to use my resources for good, not evil." As Rachel drove home through the quiet Seattle streets, she kept expecting to wake up and find that the entire evening had been a desperate dream. But her phone buzzed with a text from Harrison asking if she'd made it home safely, and she knew it was all real. Her father was going to live. She'd met someone who made her heart race in the best possible way. The surgery day 3 days later. Rachel sat in the surgical waiting room at Seattle Memorial, holding her brother Daniel's hand. He'd managed to get emergency leave and had flown in that morning. Beside them sat Harrison, who'd insisted on being there despite Rachel's protests that he didn't need to. "He'll be fine," Daniel said, though his voice shook slightly. At 23, he still had the optimistic energy of youth, but Rachel could see the fear in his eyes. "Dad's tough. He's survived way worse than this." "I know," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. "He's going to come through this just fine." Harrison had been quiet for most of the morning, respecting the siblings' need to support each other. But now, he stood and offered to get them coffee from the cafeteria. As he walked away, Daniel turned to Rachel with wide eyes. "Okay, you need to explain how you managed to snag a billionaire boyfriend in the middle of Dad's health crisis. Is there something you're not telling me about your nursing job?" "He's not my boyfriend," Rachel said, feeling her cheeks heat. "He's just someone who wanted to help." "Rachel, the man has been here since 6 this morning, brought us breakfast from some fancy bakery, and keeps looking at you like you hung the moon. That's not just someone helping. That's a man who's completely gone for you." Before Rachel could respond, Dr. Mitchell emerged from the surgical wing, still in his scrubs. Rachel and Daniel jumped to their feet and Harrison appeared beside them almost instantly. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Mitchell said, his tired face breaking into a smile. "We got the transplant completed without complications. Your father should make a full recovery." Rachel's knees went weak with relief, and Harrison's arm came around her waist, steadying her. Daniel let out a whoop of joy and pulled Dr. Mitchell into an enthusiastic hug that clearly startled the surgeon. "When can we see him?" Rachel asked, tears streaming down her face. "He's in recovery now. Give him another hour or so, and then you can visit briefly. He'll be sedated for most of today, but by tomorrow morning he should be awake and talking." Dr. Mitchell's expression grew serious. "I want you to know that without the immediate funding Mr. Blake provided, we would have had to discharge your father to hospice care. He wouldn't have survived another week. You saved his life." "We saved his life," Rachel said, looking up at Harrison with gratitude and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. After Dr. Mitchell left, Daniel excused himself to call their relatives with the good news, leaving Rachel and Harrison alone in the waiting room. "Thank you, Rachel," said her voice thick with emotion. "I don't have adequate words for what you've done for my family, but thank you." Harrison cupped her face in his hands, his blue eyes intense. "You never have to thank me for this. Seeing you smile, knowing your father is going to be okay, that's worth more than any amount of money." "Harrison," Rachel whispered, feeling something shift between them, "I think I'm falling for you. And it terrifies me because I don't know if this is real or if it's just gratitude and adrenaline." "Then let's find out," Harrison said softly. "Let's take our time, go on actual dates, learn each other's quirks and flaws. Let's see if what we feel right now survives normal, everyday life." He smiled. "Though I should warn you, I'm already pretty certain about how this is going to end." "How?" Rachel asked, her heart pounding. "With me completely in love with you," Harrison said simply. "I'm halfway there already." Rachel pulled him down for their first real kiss, and it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rachel knew that her life had changed in ways she couldn't have imagined a week ago. Whatever happened next, They would face it together, the perfect month for weeks after her father's surgery. Rachel felt like she was living in a dream. Thomas Monroe was recovering beautifully, already back home and complaining about having to take it easy. Daniel had returned to his military post with a lighter heart, and Rachel had spent nearly every evening with Harrison. Discovering that the connection they'd felt that first night was only growing stronger, Harrison was nothing like she'd expected a billionaire to be. Yes, he took her to incredible restaurants and showed her parts of Seattle she'd never experienced. But he also seemed just as happy getting takeout pizza and watching movies on his couch. He asked about her nursing shifts, remembered details about her patients, and genuinely cared about the work she did. Tonight, they were at his penthouse apartment overlooking Puget Sound, cooking dinner together. Harrison had insisted on teaching Rachel how to make his signature pasta dish, which mostly involved him standing behind her and guiding her hands while she tried not to get distracted by his proximity. "You're not paying attention," Harrison murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her neck. "The sauce needs constant stirring, or it'll stick." "I'm very distracted," Rachel admitted, leaning back against his chest. "It's your fault for being so close." Harrison's laugh rumbled through both of them. "Should I move away?" "Don't you dare." Rachel turned in his arms to face him, their lips meeting in a kiss that made her forget all about the pasta sauce. They were so absorbed in each other that neither of them heard Harrison's phone ringing insistently from the living room. It wasn't until his smartwatch began buzzing urgently that Harrison pulled away, frowning. "I'm sorry. I need to check this," he said, concern flickering across his face. "Patricia only uses the emergency code if something's seriously wrong." Rachel watched as Harrison strode to his phone, his entire demeanor changing as he read whatever messages were flooding in. His face went pale, then hard with anger, and finally settled into an expression of carefully controlled panic that made Rachel's stomach clench with dread. "What's wrong?" she asked, moving to his side. Harrison didn't answer immediately. His fingers flew across his phone screen, making calls that went unanswered, sending texts that generated immediate responses. Finally, he looked at Rachel, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than anything else could have: defeat. "There's been a major security breach at Blake Technologies," Harrison said, his voice flat. "Someone hacked our financial systems and embezzled $200 million. The board is calling for an emergency meeting. The SEC is launching an investigation. Media outlets are already running stories questioning the company's viability." Rachel felt the floor drop out from under her. "Can you recover the money?" "Maybe, eventually, but that's not the immediate problem." Harrison ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Rachel had learned meant he was deeply stressed. "The hack exposed vulnerabilities in our security systems. We provide cloud services to hundreds of major corporations. If clients lose faith in our ability to protect their data, we'll lose everything. The company's stock has already dropped 40% in after-hours trading. What can I do to help?" Rachel asked immediately. Harrison looked at her with something that might have been pain or gratitude, or both. "Nothing. This is my world, Rachel, the part I've been shielding you from. Corporate warfare, investigations, potential lawsuits. It's about to get ugly, and it's going to consume every minute of my time for the foreseeable future. Then I'll be there to support you through it," Rachel said firmly. "Harrison, I knew your life was complicated when I agreed to date you. I'm not going to run away at the first sign of trouble." "This isn't just trouble," Harrison said, his voice rising slightly. "If this goes badly, I could lose the company my father started. I could face criminal investigations if they think I was negligent. My personal assets are tied up in company stock that's currently in free fall. Everything I've built, everything I am, is at risk." Rachel reached for his hand, but he pulled away, and the gesture hurt more than she wanted to admit. "Harrison, whatever happens, we'll face it together." "Will we?" Harrison's question was sharp, almost accusatory. "Because I'm about to become toxic, Rachel. Every news outlet is going to be digging into my life, looking for scandals. They're going to find out about you, question why a tech billionaire is dating a nurse, insinuate that you're with me for money or that I'm using you as some kind of PR stunt." "I don't care what they say," Rachel protested. "You should." Harrison's voice was cold now, the tone he probably used in boardrooms when destroying competitors. Because in a week, when my face is plastered across every business publication with headlines about failure and negligence, when reporters are camped outside your apartment building, when your coworkers are gossiping about you, you're going to care very much. Rachel felt anger rising to meet the hurt in her chest. Why are you doing this? Why are you pushing me away? I'm being realistic, Harrison said. I'm giving you an out before this gets worse. Before you're dragged through the mud because of your association with me. Before you realize that dating me was the worst decision you ever made. That's not your decision to make? Rachel's voice shook with emotion. You don't get to decide what I can handle or when I've had enough. We're supposed to be partners, Harrison. Partners don't run away when things get difficult. The breaking point, Harrison's phone rang again, and he answered it immediately. Rachel listened as he spoke in clipped professional tones to whoever was on the other end. Legal team, emergency board meeting, crisis management consultants. The man she'd been cooking dinner with minutes ago had transformed back into the cold, calculating businessman who'd built a tech empire through sheer force of will. When he ended the call, he turned to Rachel with an expression that made her heart crack. I need to go to the office. This is going to be an all-nighter, probably several of them. Patricia is coordinating with the legal team. I'll come with you, Rachel offered. I can bring you food, keep you company during breaks, whatever you need. No. The single word was final, absolute. Rachel, you need to understand something. The next few weeks, maybe months, are going to be hell. I'm going to be working 20-hour days, sleeping at the office, dealing with lawyers and investigators and reporters. I won't have time for dinners or movies or whatever normal relationship things we've been doing. I understand that, Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm a nurse, Harrison. I work 12-hour shifts regularly. I understand demanding jobs and limited time. We'll figure it out. Harrison shook his head, and Rachel saw something that looked like resignation in his eyes. You deserve better than this. You deserve someone who can be there for you, who doesn't come with the baggage of a failing company and potential criminal investigations. You deserve someone whose presence in your life doesn't put you at risk. Stop telling me what I deserve, Rachel's voice broke. I love you, Harrison. Don't you understand that? I love you, not your money or your company or your perfect penthouse. I love the man who sits with me after my difficult shifts, who makes me laugh, who looks at me like I'm the most important person in his world. That man is worth fighting for. Harrison's expression cracked, revealing the pain underneath. Rachel, I'm scared. I'm terrified that you're going to see me fail, see me lose everything, and realize that I'm not the man you thought I was. I'm terrified that I'm going to drag you down with me and destroy the beautiful, uncomplicated life you had before we met. Rachel stepped closer, taking his face in her hands. My life was never uncomplicated, Harrison. I was drowning when you found me, remember? You didn't destroy anything. You saved me. And now I'm going to save you, whether you like it or not. You can't save me from this, Harrison whispered. Then we'll go down together, Rachel said fiercely. Because that's what love means, Harrison. It's not just about the good times and expensive dinners. It's about standing beside someone when their world is falling apart and refusing to let go. No matter how hard they try to push you away. Harrison pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I don't deserve you, he said against her hair. Too bad, Rachel replied. You're stuck with me anyway. The battle begins. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Rachel's life, and she'd watched her mother die and nearly lost her father. Harrison basically moved into his office at Blake Technologies, working around the clock with his legal team to contain the damage from the breach. Rachel saw him only in brief snatches, bringing him food he barely touched and clean clothes he changed into mechanically. True to Harrison's prediction, the media descended on the story like vultures. Rachel found reporters waiting outside Seattle Memorial when she finished her shifts, asking invasive questions about her relationship with Harrison and insinuating that she was a gold digger taking advantage of a vulnerable man. Her coworkers whispered when she walked by, and someone anonymously sent her printed articles highlighting the massive losses Harrison's company was facing. Through it all, Rachel refused to break. She held her head high, declined to comment to reporters, continued showing up at Harrison's office with food and encouragement even when he barely acknowledged her presence. She could see him withdrawing further into himself, the stress carving lines into his face and turning his eyes hollow. On a Thursday evening, 3 weeks after the crisis began, Rachel arrived at Blake Technologies to find Patricia Reynolds, Harrison's executive assistant, waiting for her in the lobby. "You told me not to let you up," Patricia said without preamble. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and an efficient demeanor that Rachel had always respected. "He said he doesn't want you seeing him like this." "It's too bad," Rachel said, moving toward the elevators. "I'm going up anyway." Patricia grabbed Rachel's arm gently. "Wait, I need to tell you something first. The board is pressuring Harrison to step down as CEO. They think bringing in outside leadership will restore investor confidence. If he refuses, they're threatening a vote of no confidence that could remove him entirely from the company his father founded." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "How's he handling it?" "He's not," Patricia said bluntly. "He's barely sleeping, barely eating. He's becoming self-destructive, and I think he's going to do something drastic if someone doesn't stop him." She looked at Rachel with an expression that was almost pleading. "I've worked for Harrison for 15 years. I've never seen him like this. He needs you, even if he's too stubborn to admit it." Rachel nodded and stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened on the top floor, she found Harrison's corner office dark except for the glow of his computer screens. He was standing at the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "I told Patricia not to let you up," Harrison said without turning around. "She tried," Rachel replied, setting down the bag of food she'd brought. "I didn't listen." Harrison finally turned to face her, and Rachel's heart broke at what she saw. This wasn't the confident, powerful man who'd rescued her from Walsh. This was someone who'd been beaten down, worn away by stress and fear, until only exhaustion remained. "Why are you still here?" Harrison asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. "Why haven't you walked away from this disaster?" Rachel crossed the office to stand in front of him. "Do you remember what you told me the night we met? You said that watching Walsh try to exploit my desperation made you angrier than you'd been in years. Do you remember what you did about it?" "I threatened him and forced him to resign," Harrison said. "No," Rachel corrected. "You protected me. You put yourself between me and something that wanted to hurt me, and you didn't hesitate for a second. Well, guess what? Now it's my turn. The media, the board, the investigators, they're all trying to hurt you. And I'll be damned if I stand by and let that happen without a fight. Rachel, I'm losing everything. The board is going to force me out. The company my father built is probably going to be sold off piece by piece. I'm going to lose millions, maybe face lawsuits. How can you want to be part of that?" Rachel took his face in her hands, making him look at her. "Because none of that is who you are. You're not your company, or your net worth, or your father's legacy. You're the man who saved my father's life without expecting anything in return. You're the man who makes me laugh when I've had terrible shifts at the hospital. You're the man I love, and I love all of you, not just the successful parts." Harrison's carefully maintained control finally shattered. He pulled Rachel against him and broke down completely, great shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul. Rachel held him through it all, stroking his hair and whispering that everything would be okay, even though neither of them knew if that was true. When Harrison finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer than they'd been in weeks. "I don't know how to do this, Rachel. I don't know how to rebuild from nothing. Everything I know, everything I am, is tied up in Blake Technologies." "Then we figure it out together," Rachel said firmly. "Maybe you start a new company. Maybe you take some time to breathe and remember what made you love technology in the first place. Maybe you do something completely different. But whatever you do, you don't do it alone." Harrison searched her face, looking for any sign that she didn't mean it. When he found none, his smile was small but genuine. "How did I get so lucky to find you?"